The Photon television series of the 1980s that was developed as a vehicle for promoting the popular laser tag sport of the same name was predominantly filmed in Tokyo, Japan in 1986. However, there were also scenes filmed in America that appeared at the beginning and end of each episode. Actress Tamara Johnson played the role of the mother, Barbara Jarvis, on the series and is joining me today to share some of her memories from the set. Hello, Tamara.
Hi, I'm so happy to be talking with you today.
Oh, thank you so much for taking some time. This is wonderful. Now, you were involved in a whole other end of the production, and the Photon set in Japan was doing one thing, while meanwhile in the States there were some other things going on. Could we begin first with how did you learn about the show, and what was the process for you getting cast as Barbara Jarvis?
Well, I was in Dallas and I'd been doing a lot of dinner theater shows outside and would come back in. So I was kind of bouncing between Amarillo and Dallas. And my agent, pretty sure this came through my agent, that this show was going to be casting. And so I went to the audition, and it was actually in two motel rooms. And so the casting director was in one room and all the talent that were coming in to audition. And there's probably about, 20 women in there auditioning for the role of Barbara. And so it went on for, a couple of hours, I want to say. And slowly they would just let people go until it got down to the last two people. And Kevin O'Donnell was the director that I recall the most. And so it just got down to two people, and they brought us in again separately. And then I don't really remember how they told us, if they told us there or if they called the agent. They probably would call the agent, but I think it was whittled down to just the last two people. So I was thrilled to find out that this role was the mother of the young man who was supposed to save the universe. I felt like I was right in there with June Lockhart and Barbara Billingsley for Leave It to Beaver and Lassie. So off to save the world.
Excellent. And where were the scenes actually filmed? Do you remember anything about the location?
Yes, I do remember. Dallas, it was kind of up in a northeastern Dallas area. It was a fairly new development. I don't know, it was probably about 25, 30 minutes to get up there. So it was northeastern side of Dallas. And when we went in, I was always kind of surprised that someone would actually give up their house for 3 weeks. How could they do that? But it was told to me on the set that the owners took the money and took a vacation and let the whole crew come in and take over their house for those. I guess it was about 2 or 3 weeks that we shot.
Oh my goodness, that's exciting. And they have a famous house now.
Yes, they do. I wonder if they have people driving by. They did have a pool in the backyard, as I recall, and a lot of our lunches were we had picnic tables on the side of the pool, and so we would have our lunch on the side of the pool, and it was an interesting experience because half of the crew was Japanese. Most of the crew was Japanese, and so they were teaching us a few Japanese terms about how to say thank you and please, and I couldn't possibly remember what those are now, but it was a fascinating project because you could really see where communication was not just relying on the words. People would come in and communicate with each other. They had a translator there who could translate between the two languages. So it was a great project.
That's fantastic, and it sounds like the set was a little bit unusual. What kinds of things do you remember about your time on the Photon set and how the filming process worked?
Now, on the Photon set, you mean in the home or the gaming area?
Actually, that's an interesting point. I meant on the set at the house, but actually, did you find yourself filming in other places as well? Were there more than just the home scenes that you were part of?
We did. In fact, it was I think it was the last thing that we shot, which actually turned out to be early on, I think, when they released the episodes, because we were all rooting for Christopher to, play the game and to win. So we're all kind of up on this balcony, and Clarissa and Paul and myself are up, rooting him on. But I think that turned out to be kind of in one of the early episodes, but it was the last thing we shot. So that was the first and only time that we all went to the actual Photon laser arena.
Excellent. And yes, that appeared in the very first episode, The Recruit. And did you have any knowledge of the game, or did you get some experience with the game when you were on set doing that?
I did. I don't recall putting the gear on and trying that. I'd known about laser tag, that was happening, and it had been in Dallas for about 2 years. And this was all to kind of increase the awareness of this form of gaming. And but I don't think that I ever put on a vest and went in actually was shooting the gun. I think I did walk through the arena, which is kind of this maze, and that's about all I remember about getting into the playing arena. So, but other than that, most of our days were spent on the set. So it was a living room, kitchen in the back area, big little family area. And I remember the upstairs, because the makeup was always going to be upstairs. And Christopher, when I guess he's shooting one of his scenes about, he's got the music on too loud. So that was shot in one of the upstairs bedrooms. But a lot was happening kind of in the front of the house. There were some scenes shot with some of the cars, and I guess bringing groceries in or something. I'm looking at this one picture where I'm seated in a car in this black and yellow checkered blouse, and I can't recall. I think that was having car trouble, and I think maybe the hood was up and somebody was looking under the hood, but I don't recall seeing that scene ever.
Yes, that was in an episode where Bodhi goes off on a solo mission, and so I guess he had a little stint repairing the car beforehand.
Okay, all right.
Now, did you have any memories or any stories to share about things that you remember of your fellow cast members?
Clarissa, I had known, and Paul as well. They were local actors in Dallas, and Clarissa was a young child actor, and so I was aware of her in being in other films or other shooting that was happening in Dallas. And Paul also was an actor, a local actor in the area. So I had worked, sporadically with them, but this was the first time we were all put together as a family.
And how much did you know about what the cast was working on in Japan?
Very little. The sides that we got were numbered. Some of them have titles on them, and some of them don't. But it was mostly just numbered episodes: Photon 1, 2, 3, and they would be maybe about 3-4 pages long. And so we just really had the family section that we were working on. So we knew very little about what the other side of the world was going to be happening with in Japan. So they explained that he was going to be going off and fighting these galactic battles, but we hadn't seen any pictures or to see what the designs were or anything like that. So we were our own little nucleus.
Were you ever clued into what the storyline was and how your part might tie back to it?
No, we never saw any of the other scripts. We only got, they're kind of like called sides, where like in a musical, if you're doing a musical, you're not gonna get the whole script. They're just gonna give you a couple of words before you're supposed to start speaking. So they're called sides, or kind of mini little scripts. And so we just kind of got that half, and I think it was just, it really wasn't important for us really to know what was going on, because we were living in our own Earth world at that time. And so we were just that cohesive, family unit. So that when Buddy Lee took off, we didn't know that he was going anywhere.
Absolutely.
Our time was just frozen. So
now, you had mentioned one of the directors you remembered. Do you have any other memories of other directors, production people, anybody who helped to make it happen from behind the scenes?
I remembered one of the other Japanese directors, and I'm probably not going to say his name correctly, but it's Yasuhiro Horiuchi. But it was Kevin mostly that was communicating with us, and he was from out of Geek Enterprise out in Los Angeles at the time. So we were kind of surprised. I mean, we had a filming studio out in Dallas that was called Las Colinas, and we were, eager to see more film work come into the Dallas area. But we were really surprised that they were traveling and chose Dallas. I don't know exactly why they chose Dallas.
Perhaps it had to do with that being the base for the Photon Center, the first Photon Center, and with George Carter.
Well, that would probably be correct in that assumption. Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, did you ever have an opportunity to work with Jim Carrington? I understand from some of the cast who worked in Japan, he was the American supervising director who worked with them.
I don't remember Jim at all. I don't remember working with him. So he could have been there, but I just really remembered working more so with Kevin.
Now, what was your acting experience prior to being cast on the show?
Well, let's see. I had just fairly recently, in the years prior, just gotten my equity card, and so I was doing much more stage work than film work. The film stuff that would come through Dallas, we would try to grab onto it. The film is really difficult to get cast in. It's just really hard. So I was doing more stage work. I was working at a theater called New Arts that was downtown Dallas, and working in various other theaters. My husband at the time was also writing murder mysteries, so we would go to like the Plaza of the Americas and put on these 3-day long murder mysteries that were very popular in the 80s. And so people would fly in from all over the country to participate in these 3-day long murder mysteries. In fact, one of the murder mysteries that we had, the people who came in, they were given characters as well, and there was this big costume party that they had to attend on the very first night. And during one of these murder mysteries, a guy walked into the gift shop. It was about 9 o'clock in the evening, and he said, "Give me all your money. This is a stick-up." And the lady behind the desk said, "Oh, you characters, you people just get into your characters so much." And he was like, "No, give me your money. This is a stick-up."
Oh,
she was like,
no.
"Oh, no, 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 no." And it turned out it was really a stick-up. And so they had to call the police in, so we really had an investigation then. But it was such an unusual experience to actually hold up somebody during a murder mystery, because the whole hotel is being used for the murder mystery of clue rooms and trails and red herrings put all over the hotel. So anyway, so we were doing all kinds of things like that. Let me see. I think I had just been nominated for Best Actress in Dallas on a show that I did. So those are kind of the events that were happening.
Was the Photon experience and doing a TV series like this a first for you?
I'd done a film before, but this was for something that was long. It was going to be on television. I did a couple of little film jobs that have never really surfaced that I've been able to see. But this was certainly the biggest project at that time. So in a long stint, I mean, usually your film jobs can be, rather short, but this was a good 2.5, 3 weeks long. So it was a great engagement.
And during that window, how did the process of filming the 26 episodes go? Were you filming back to back? Were you doing a couple of scenes out of order?
Yes, all the scenes were done out of order. We really didn't know, I mean, other than the number on the script. And it was all based on, what day. I think you'll see on some of the notes I've written down kind of the day that we're going to be shooting that schedule. So it all kind of bounced around to what kind of lighting they needed, if it was going to be a night shot or a day shot. And then from that, you kind of put the night shots together. And of course, you've got wardrobe, so you want to kind of, those bookend scenes that were back to the family. You want to kind of keep those wardrobe shots kind of close together. So it depended on, once you have, the crew is supposed to be guaranteed a certain number of hours by the time they wrap before they can start the next scene. So you really never know from day to day until like the end of that day is wrapped what your next call is going to be the next day. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I wanted to know what a typical day might be like, but was there even such a thing as a typical day?
No, there wasn't, because if there was going to be night scenes, I mean, we could be called at, we could get there at 5 o'clock in the morning. We could get there at, 8 p.m. at night and shoot all night. So there really wasn't a typical schedule. Once we got rolling, I think we only had like one day off, but I could be wrong about that. So once we got rolling, they spend a lot of time of trying to get the order of those scenes together based on what if they need exterior light or interior light or what time of day they're shooting.
I see. Now, you had talked about how you had known of Paula Roque and Clarissa Reed, who played the father and the sister on the show. What do you remember of Christopher Lockwood?
He is so handsome. I remember meeting him, and I was like, wow, he's my son. Okay. And I think he was, I think I was probably only about 10 years older than he was. Do you know how old he was when he filmed this?
I believe that
I think he was
actors have
18.
recalled somewhere in the 20s, early 20s, perhaps.
Early 20s. Okay. So I was about 28. So I had him when I was very young. But he was a lovely man, very generous, just handsome, very sweet.
Very nice. And do you have any knowledge about how any of the other cast got to be involved with the show?
No, I never heard any of their casting stories or, how their auditions went. I never really knew. I mean, once I knew who the cast was, I was like, oh, good, okay, I know them. But I didn't. I don't know what their casting process was.
Now, what kind of rapport did you have with the rest of the cast? Did you spend a lot of time or have close interactions during this window?
Well, yes, we were there. I mean, it's kind of, when you get into a situation like that, it becomes a second family because you're all just flexible with your hours and you're going to be there, everybody's going to be there. And so, we'd get our call and we'd go up at different times. There'd be a holding area while we wait for the makeup or wardrobe to address each person and kind of what they were going to be wearing that day. And there's a lot of, a lot of thought goes into what colors are going to be complementary in the scene from wardrobe. I think I brought a couple of my own items in for wardrobe, but they also had many items for me to wear, and so they were just pulling things from their stock. I think probably one of the most memorable was and it's probably one of my favorite episodes, and that was when we were baking a cake for grandmother, and we had all of that. I don't remember. It seemed like it was foam, but I don't remember exactly what they had. Some of it was kind of powder that, when the cake blew up and there was powder everywhere. Do you remember that episode?
I remember the episode very well, and I have difficulty remembering the part about the flour.
Okay. Well, I remember that we were covered in head to toe. I was covered in head to toe with white, I want to say powder or foam or whipped cream or something. I was covered in some kind of I don't know if it was the cake. I thought it was the cake. I thought something had exploded in the cake, but
The premise at the beginning had to do with the cake burning. Is it possible that the
right.
scene ended up being changed around some?
And now that is a possibility. That is a possibility because I know that I think it changed around a little bit. One of the episodes where Barbara was supposed to be Clarissa was like reading her future with a crystal ball, and she was going to get a call from a Hollywood person. And one at the end of my script that I got, it was like she was only going to be a tomato for a very popular underwear commercial. And I think there was probably some conflict there because as I saw the episode, it said that she was going to be a rug. Does that make sense?
Yes, I recall
So I
that.
think that changed changed from what the original script was. So perhaps there was a change in that. I have not seen all of the episodes. Shortly after we filmed this, my husband and I left for Virginia and moved and left Dallas. I had just, as I said, I had just gotten nomination for Best Actress there, and I was ready to kind of kick up my feet a little bit and kind of let them call me.
Mm-hmm.
But we were moving, so that's when I really, really, really knew I was married. Is that I had to move too. So we left Dallas and went to Virginia and started managing our theater there for 12 years. But anyway, I digress on that. But so I haven't seen all of the episodes to be able to put back in my memory of being covered. But I remember the kitchen was completely white. Everything was like, I don't know what they used. And I want to say that Chris was also covered in white.
I think that episode's going to need to have a review, I guess. Now, you said that you moved away and you didn't see the episodes, but since the series was airing nationally, did you ever have a chance to watch it when it was actually on the air?
Well, I did see it before we left Dallas. I think it was pretty quickly the first episode came up. And we left Dallas. My husband actually left before I did, so he left in I want to say the end of August, and I think I left in October. So I had seen the first episode in Dallas because I remember watching it in that home that we had, and a friend coming over and playing like he was. Let the force or let the darkness grows. He was quoting lines from the show. And so I remember I'd seen the first episode there. So after that, when we moved to Virginia, we were working so much. We were putting up so many shows, and there was such a small staff. The first show, my husband and I really did all of the technical work ourselves, and so there wasn't a lot of time, and we were working 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, and Monday would be our day off. So we would, I was doing costumes and the stage manager and props. And my husband was building the set and directing the show and doing all the publicity and everything. So we didn't have a lot of time on our hands to be able to, look at the TV.
I see.
So, and I don't think that I ever really knew how big and popular it was. I never really realized that. I know it was nationally syndicated, but I want to say I looked for it in Virginia, but I don't recall it showing up here in Virginia at that time. But, actors will generally try to catch whatever and they're on television for something. But I just don't remember seeing a lot of other shows after the first one that I saw.
From what you've seen since, do you have a favorite episode?
I still think it's this cooking the pie. I did see them very recently because you sent me the links to them. Thank you very much. So that I could actually see them on YouTube. I found some early ones pretty easily, and then you had sent me some other ones that the quality was so much better on. So favorite episodes, I did like the cake, because that kind of baking the cake, and it didn't end that same way. I think it ended somehow differently that I recall. Um, but I remember going in with Christopher with his loud music, and so that's what I recall. Is just that big spray of all that white everywhere. It was in the kitchen.
Whether it made it to the tape or not, it sounds like you had a good time.
We did. I can remember the crew and everybody just standing there, just laughing with all this white powder all over that kitchen.
Well, what would you say was your favorite thing about the filming? And also, what would you say your most difficult experience was?
Let's see. My favorite thing about the filming was, I love the idea that it was going to be a children's show, and that it was talking to children when they're kind of coming out of that magical age, but yet they still feel that, it gave them such personal power. I think that's what I could kind of feel from that. And I think our family was representative of a good, supportive, loving family. And I just like the idea that when the shows were there, that the 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds could identify with them, and they wanted to be able to play the game and relive them and just kind of live out these magical, I guess, kind of to extend those magical years, I guess, a little bit further. So I like
perspective
that had, about identifying good and bad, and trying to make the good choices, about trying to take care of animals, trying to have empathy. I think it created empathy with youngsters who were watching it.
Very nice.
And was a teaching tool in a way.
Yes, there was always a moral involved.
Right.
You said that you didn't realize the popularity of the show, but did you understand or know anything of the popularity of Photon as a laser tag game?
Yes, I knew that was popular, but I thought at the time that they were looking for much more popularity. So I think they were really using this as a promotion tool to really have more photons showing up across the United States. So is that what happened?
There certainly was merchandising connected to the game, connected to some characters. There was a start to a line of action figures. Were you told anything about the intentions for the show or the marketing?
No, and I think had we probably been told about any of the marketing or anything, I think the agents would have probably tried to get some piece of the action for the talent for that. So, of course, it was a non-union show, so there aren't any rules and regulations on that. But I think had the agents known that there was going to be any kind of marketing, that's kind of I think that's something that happened in the 80s where things just kind of spun off. Maybe they weren't originally planned, but I would think that if you're going to do Photon, you would eventually think that you're going to have some guns and some helmets and such out there. But I'd never heard anything about any action figures.
There were home laser tag sets, and there was a book series. There were.
Really? I didn't know there was a book series. How interesting.
Yes. Yeah, so there was a fair amount.
That character, Leon, I really think he is the inspiration for the Ninja Turtles.
Really?
I just think, yeah, I do. There's something about him. I mean, if you just kind of shave off that hump that he has and put his head back in place, I think he makes pretty good Ninja Turtles.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Well, and certainly there's a lot of people that are fondly remembering the Turtles with all these resurgence of nostalgia from the 80s. At what point did you realize that there are still people who fondly remember Photon, both the game and the series? And what was your reaction to that?
Listen, I had no idea that people were still fond of Photon. That just came out of the blue. So it wasn't until Jason Bach, he contacted me, and I thought, oh, well, somebody's been on IMDb to figure out if there's anybody still alive who was working on this project. And on IMDb, I'm just assuming because he actually contacted my agent here in Virginia Beach, and she was the one who contacted me and said, you have groupies. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, they want to have a reunion and they want you to come and talk with them. And I was just like, really? You're kidding. There are people who really remember Photon. And so, I guess there's a pretty good memory tied into these little 9-year-old warriors out there with their laser guns and their helmets, that they remember this aspect of their childhood. So I was quite surprised.
Nearly 30 years have passed now since the show, and you were one of the special guests who was invited to be part of the Photon 30th anniversary celebration of Photon that was held in Laurel, Maryland. How was
Right.
the invite actually extended? You're talking about to the agents, but when you got this, what were your thoughts when you learned that such an event was going to be taking place?
I was really surprised. I just had no idea that anything like this would come up, and I was so flattered, I guess. I was just like, wow, somebody really remembers that. I mean, I still have this on my resume, just in case anybody saw it. Um, but I just it just floored me really that people were coming together and that they were still playing the games and just remembered this series so vividly. So I was charmed, I guess. Charmed would be a good word to describe how I felt when I found out about it. So a couple of emails went back and forth between my agent and myself, and I was like, yes. So my husband and I were actually heading to Europe on Monday, and the event was going to happen on Saturday. I think it was Saturday, yes. And so I was like, yeah, I can drive up to Baltimore and go attend the reunion and drive back and still get packed and get on that plane. So
Well, as somebody who was there, it was so nice to be able to have some time to chat and hear about some of those memories.
yes, it was great meeting you there. And it was great to see George Carter there. I remembered him coming to the set, particularly I think one day when we were having lunch, he came over and so it was great meeting him and seeing him there and seeing some of the cast members. I thought I was going to be the only cast member there. I didn't know that Mandar was coming, so that was a great surprise. And so thank you so much for the pictures that you sent that you were taking of that event. It was quite fun.
Oh, most certainly. And let me ask you about that. Obviously, you didn't have interactions with the actors who were working in Japan, but David Stay, who played Mandar, did come to the event as well. And so when you met him, what was the experience like to know that you were both part of this experience and to be meeting for the first time?
Well, I didn't quite recognize him. It took me a little while to recognize him as Mandar because I hadn't seen that many of the episodes. But when I saw how popular he was at the event, people were eventually let me know that he was Mandar, and I was like, oh, of course, now I can see it. Now I can see it. So we just chatted briefly. I mean, we were really on two different film shoots. Chatted briefly about how surprised we were that we were invited and that there was following a fan base of Photon warriors still out there who remembered the television show. So it was great to see him, meet him for the first time, really.
Well, that's terrific. And it's great to know that that brought up some great memories as your life moved on after the show. And here's a chance for you to remember some of that. But after the show happened, where has your life taken you since filming?
So let me see. So we moved from Dallas and we went to Virginia, and my husband and I ran a small professional theater up in Northern Virginia area. for about 12 years, and we were putting on a new show every 3 weeks. So we were very, very busy. We became this factory, and we were going up to New York and bringing most of our actors down from New York and Washington, D.C., and we housed them all. We were living in the Shenandoah Valley, so we housed them all there, and so that was kind of our life of just this rolling thing that would happen. I mean, we would start around March. We had a couple of months off during January, February, March, but Christopher, my husband, would be going off to New York, and I would go join him. We'd be doing some casting during that time. But once it started around April, we started building sets, and things just started rolling. So eventually we got some more people hired on there to help us out with some of this situation there. That was just, it was very busy putting on all these shows every year. So we would roll from like April all the way to Christmas show. We'd close with A Christmas Carol. So we did that for 12 years, and just felt that we had worked our market there. So we decided we were going to retire from Wayside Theater. And from there, we started looking at going into academia. And we have, at this point, our son, Jeremy Owens, he is about 10 years old. And we start moving. And so we went and we started looking into academia, and my husband starts applying at various schools around the area. So our first job that we got was in Pennsylvania at Dickinson College, and we were there for a year. And then after that, we went to South Bend, Indiana, and we were there teaching for a year. And it was in South Bend that I actually started writing my one-woman show, because there wasn't a lot of theater, and I was union now. And so there wasn't a lot of union work for me. And Chicago was like 2 hours away in the snow. So I started writing this one-woman show for myself. So anyway, then a year later we moved to Baltimore, and we were in Baltimore for about 3 years. And I became a casting associate with Betsy Royal Casting while I was there, and did that for 3 years. I was really running all the auditions. So we did projects like working on The West Wing when they would come into Washington, D.C. to shoot the exteriors, and a lot of national commercials. We did some Super Bowl commercials there, and just all kinds of commercials through that agency. And then I was still doing shows and getting engagements for my one-woman show. And then from there we moved to Williamsburg. So that's where we are now, is Williamsburg, Virginia. And so at this point, my husband is the artistic director of Virginia Shakespeare Festival here in Williamsburg. And I'm working with him right now, as we always work together. I'm working as a general management assistant to him. And I also teach. So we both teach at William & Mary. I teach acting and have been doing so for about 8 years now. And I continue also and continue to work the area. So I do films around the area, stage productions. So I'll travel down to Georgia to do a stage production, or I'll go to Pittsburgh to shoot a film with Julianne Moore, and drive down to North Carolina. So I'm in my car a lot now. Where I live exactly is not doesn't have a lot of work, so I tend to drive a lot. So I go to Richmond, I go to Charlottesville, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and Pittsburgh, and then occasionally I'll make it up to New York. But I can kind of juggle all of those locations by still having my teaching. And if I get a job, like I just shot a job in Roanoke this last semester, so I was gone for I guess 3 of my class days, or 4 of my class days, and so I just hired a substitute in to cover me while I was gone. And so I have a full career in acting. It's really narrowed down to film work and stage work, and I love both of those. And I've taught workshops along the way, in commercial workshops. So it's I'm about to start another show this next week in Richmond called Alive the Mind. So I've been trying to get off book now to get to rehearsal fairly well off book. So I start that next week, and then after that, I really don't know what's going to be next, and so that's kind of the way that actors live. You know, they don't know what's coming next, but I feel sure that there are films out there that are going to be coming in the Richmond area. There's another TV pilot that I'm going to be working on this summer. So it's all very up in the air, and that you just have to learn to ride that wave where you don't know where your next job is coming from. So that's kind of where I've been. I was able to take my one-woman show, which is called In Haste, Laura Keene. I did take that to the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. and perform there. So that was a really great experience that I had.
Well, that's wonderful. And what is that show about?
The show is about Laura Keene, who was the actress who was on stage when President Lincoln was assassinated. And I thought, wouldn't that be interesting? Because all of the information about the assassination is really from a man's perspective. And I thought, wouldn't that be interesting to see? I thought first that John Wilkes Booth was part of the cast and that somehow he just shot the president. And in South Bend, they had an exhibit called Picturing Lincoln at the Indiana Museum of History. And I went there, and I saw the exhibit, and I saw somebody who was playing like he was President Lincoln's boyhood friend. And they had a section that was about the assassination. And the Studebaker brothers were from South Bend, Indiana, and they had purchased the carriage that delivered the president and the presidential party to Ford's Theater. So I walked back to this area, and I saw that carriage, and I saw the playbill that was up on the wall, and John Wilkes Booth's name was not there as the cast, part of the cast. So I just really became interested in that John Wilkes Booth killed the president during the largest laugh line of the show. And I am a comedian, and I thought, I'm going to find out what that line was. So I went in, was starting to read this script and trying to identify what that line was. Well, I met some people along the way and started doing some research, and it was just fascinating to get her story and to kind of put the assassination together from Laura Keene's life. So I went back to the museum, and I said, after about, about a month of research, and I said, you know me, but I would like to come in here and portray Laura Keene, and I would like for you to hire me. And they were like, but we don't know you. And I said, well, that's okay. Just act like you do. And they were like, and I said, I'll be back. So I went and did 2 more months of research, morning, noon, and night, and just poring over this. And just trying to find out about her life, before she showed up at Ford's Theater, because it was really on a tour that all of this happened. And so I went back, and I made another appointment with them, and I went back after my 3 months of research, and I went back and I did the interview in character as Laura Keene.
Oh, wow.
And they said, when can you start? And I said, I have to get a dress. And so they gave me this, and they said, here is a costume. We have access to a costume, huge costume display. Go tell them you're going to get a dress for $10. And this was an antebellum, petticoat dress. And I was like, $10. So I went and borrowed a dress from them and continued to work there. And then you'll remember that we were about to move to Baltimore when we left South Bend. And that's where Laura Keene became America's first female producer. And she did that in 1853 in Baltimore. So I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to go in and put the early part of her life before she meets this assassination. And just to go into, women, because women were not working at all outside of the home. And so she was really trying to break through these barriers of all these male-dominated industries. And so that's what my show is about. It's about an early women's libber who didn't know she was a libber, but she came from England and didn't take no for an answer. So she traveled all around, and she has a fascinating story. So that's what my show is about.
My goodness, that sounds like a fantastic show, and what a project.
It was a great project.
It certainly sounds like you have a lot of really cool memories to be looking back on in your whole theatrical career here, and Photon being one of them. What do you feel as you take this time now and you look back on Photon episodes or start thinking about these Photon memories all these years later?
Well, I think it was probably really the biggest gig. I've had some great gigs, and I think it was probably my first big gig. Everybody was coming in from Los Angeles. You're getting to work with people that you don't necessarily know, working with a Japanese crew. I mean, it was just such extraordinary circumstances to have an opportunity to work with. So I think that's what I value most. Is it was really a great break for me, and I do remember that audition process very clearly, about him just slowly eliminating all these people until he got down to the bottom two. And I have no idea why I got it, but I think it was the first big break. And golly Bill, I didn't even know it was that big of a project, I guess. So it's been a surprise all around from the beginning to end.
Well, very nice. And you were definitely part of something that created some wonderful memories for the fans who still remember the show. What would you say to people who are still fans of Photon and maybe listening to this interview?
I think it's probably one of the things, I guess it'd probably be one of the mottos of my life, and I teach this to my students, and that is, I think you're always, and I didn't make this up, I can't tell you who to give the credit to, but I do revert to this often, and that is that I think you can always identify kind of where you are in your life. You're either in tradition, transition, or transformation. And when you're in, I think people know pretty well what transition is all about. And that if you can recognize where you are when you're in that transition period, you can know that what is coming next is going to be a transformation. And then after that transformation, after a while, that transformation is going to turn back into tradition again, and everything's going to be the same old, not much happening. And then another transition is going to come in. So I think it's really helpful to be able to identify where you are whenever you're going through something in life, whether you're in tradition, transition, or transformation. And so I think certainly looking at Photon, it was very much a transitional time period for me, and it certainly turned into a transformation. So I guess that's what I would want to share. And to go to Utah. Travel to Utah. Oh my goodness, what a beautiful place. Southern Utah, beautiful, beautiful country.
Oh.
That, when they had the dinosaur episode, they have a dinosaur national park in Utah that should not, Dinosaur National Monument is what it's called, and it should not be missed.
Well, very nice.
Yes.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking some time to talk about Photon and what you've done since. Do you have any final thoughts before we break off?
Well, I would like to say that I think that this beginning of Photon, I'm sure everybody wants to kind of be grandfathered in, but I think that Photon and these warriors and these different characters, these fantastical characters, kind of morphed into the Ninja Turtles, and I think from that it morphed into these Pink Power Rangers, or the Power Rangers. And the last thing that I want to add is with the Power Rangers, one of the Pink Ranger, her name was Erin Cahill, and when we were at Wayside doing a show, she came up and performed in one of our Christmas carols. There, she and her sister, and so we knew Erin before she became the Pink Power Ranger, and she actually babysat our son. So our son is growing up now and can say that his babysitter was the Pink Power Ranger.
That's a
But
fantastic story.
I think that just like the Photon Warriors are fighting for good and evil, I think all of these are really, really closely related with the Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers. And I think it'll be really interesting to find out what that next group for the next generation will be.
Well, absolutely. And that just sparks one more question. What does your son think about all this? He's seen the Power Rangers. What does he think of Photon?
I don't think he's seen Photon, but I will be sending him these links. He's going to be coming. Actually, he'll probably be here, so I should probably wait and see his face when he actually views them here. He's coming into William and Mary to do some lighting because he does lighting in New York City now. So he's coming back to his alma mater, and we'll be doing some lighting for us. So he'll be here. I think in April, yes. So I'll show him these, but I don't think he's seen them.
Well, maybe they'll spark some further interest in some laser tag.
Yes. Well, he's played laser tag, I know. So I think this will be interesting. Children don't ever think there was a life before them, so it'll be really fun to bring this out and show him some of these pictures and some of these videos.
Well, very nice. And again, I thank you so much, Tamara, for taking some time to talk with me today. Tamara Johnson, who played Barbara Jarvis on the Photon TV show, thank you so much.
Lori, thank you so much for reaching out and connecting with me. It's just been such a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you.